afternoon, committee members. I'm going to present the State Fair's budget. So it's on white paper in front of you with State Fair at the top. I'll give you a second to find it in the many papers you have in front of you. Okay, looking at that white document, the Kansas State Fair budget, I'm going to move straight to page 3. On page 3, looking at that second graph at the bottom of the page, I just wanted to point out that under normal circumstances, the State Fair only uses state general fund for debt service expenditures. But in fiscal year 2021, the agency did receive $2.3 million state general fund to assist with lost revenue after they canceled the fair in 2020. So the fair relies on that revenue to function as an agency, but because the fair wasn't held, the Legislative Coordinating Council allocated $2.3 million in state general fund. So that's that spike that you see at the bottom of page 3. Of that $2.3 million, the fair carried over $1.5 million into fiscal year 2022. And I just want to emphasize that it's not that the agency didn't need that $1.5 million that they carried it over. It's really a timing issue. So the state fiscal year ends in June, but the fair is held in September. So the agency used half the money of that $2.3 million to prepare for the fair, book entertainers and things like that. And they're using the other half in fiscal year 22 to pay for the fair now that they've had it in September. So I just wanted to emphasize that it's not that they aren't using the money, it's just a timing issue. I'm going to move on to page 5. On page 5, looking at the agency estimate, the agency estimates revised fiscal year 2022 expenditures of $6.4 million, including $1.7 million state general fund. This is an all funds decrease of $1.2 million and a state general fund decrease of $850,000 below the fiscal year 2022 approved amount. So we'll talk about that $850,000 state general fund decrease first, and that's item number 2 on page 5 at the very bottom. So the agency was originally estimated to continue paying bonds on the State Fair Master Plan until fiscal year 2024. But over the summer, the Department of Administration decided to pay off those bonds early. And so that $850,000 that was originally budgeted in fiscal year 2022 is no longer needed. So those bonds are being paid off. So that's causing that state general fund decrease that we just talked about. Turning the page to page 6. For fiscal year 2022, the agency is estimating increased expenditures for capital improvements. So that's item number 5 on page 6. That increase is about $169,000. Item number 7 on page 6. The agency is estimating increased expenditures for fair time workers. And finally, at the very bottom of page 6, the governor has concurred with the agency's revised estimate in fiscal year 2022. And Mr. Chairman, I'll pause for questions on fiscal year 2022 before I do fiscal year 2023.
Committee, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick one as you go through this is advertising. The increase, is that over last year when we didn't maybe advertise, or is it over the 2020 year?
So it's over the 2022 approved amount. So the legislature has already approved a budget for fiscal year 2022. This is $100,000 over that estimated amount.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think for my questions, I'll wait for whoever's going to come up and talk about the fair. So,
In that case, I'll move on to page 8 for fiscal year 2023. On page 8 for fiscal year 2023, looking underneath the box, the agency requests 2023 expenditures of $6.4 million, including $135,000 state general fund. This is a decrease of just under $9,000 and a state general fund decrease of $1.5 million compared to the fiscal year 2022 revised estimate. So that state general fund decrease of $1.5 million is what we just talked about. So the agency carried over $1.5 million into fiscal year 2022. Those funds are no longer available in fiscal year 2023, so it's causing a decrease when you compare the years. And for that all funds decrease of about $9,000, the agency is estimating decreased expenditures for gasoline and for advertising. And that's items 2 and 3 on page 8. At the bottom of page 8, the governor has concurred with the agency's 2023 request. And I'll turn to the very back page. On that very back page, that's page 14, is the agency's capital improvements request. So underneath the box, the agency estimates revised capital improvements expenditures of $765,000, all from special revenue funds. This is a decrease of about $572,000 and a state general fund decrease of $735,000 below the approved amount. And that's again due to paying off those bonds early. And the governor did concur with the agency's 2022 capital improvements revised estimate. And finally, looking at fiscal year 2023 capital improvements, the agency requests 2023 capital improvements of $763,000, all from special revenue funds. That's a decrease of about $2,600 below the 2022 capital improvements estimate. And the governor did concur with the agency's fiscal year 2023 capital improvements request. And Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for further questions on the state fair's budget.
Any questions, committee? I guess we have no questions. So I guess next is Brian Schultz with the State Fair. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, member of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to come in front of you today. Again, my name is Brian Schultz. I'm the new general manager at the Kansas State Fair. Started my position back in August of this last year and had a great opportunity to work with former Senator Ed Berger as our interim general manager to learn about the process of the Kansas State Fair. And at this point in time, what I have is a PowerPoint presentation that kind of just goes through the fair as a whole. So as it says, we are celebrating all things Kansas. That is what our whole fair is about. We have been around since 1913, and every year we bring in approximately 350,000 people over the 10 days of the Kansas State Fair. In 2020, as you're well aware, we didn't have a fair, which was very difficult economically for us. We had to reduce our staff by nearly half. We had, needs to catch up a little bit. We furloughed 4 of our management team members, and if it wasn't for the support of the legislature, there's a good chance the fair would not continue to exist. Some statistics from 2021, we had over 281,000 people attend the fair. That's about 20% down from previous years. We had about just shy of 15,000 school-aged children come through our Kansas' largest classroom from over 55 counties. We had more than 24,000 people that attended one of our Next Tech wireless grandstand concerts. We had about 583 vendors on grounds for our fair. Some changes that we've made. We refocused our branding in 2022. for 2021 and 2022 with our mission of celebrating all things Kansas. Our expansion was in our signage, our merchandise, and our advertising. We made Kansas communities and tourism more prevalent on our grounds. The last weekend of the fair, we actually brought in Kansas-based organizations to showcase all their tourism during the fair. And then we also increased our entertainment on our free stage that was Kansas-based, as well as our special events and our contest. This was our 21st year of the Legislative Grand Drive showmanship, which is always a great experience for those that have attended and participated. And a lot of times there's people that have never worked with cattle before, and that's quite interesting in itself. Some more pictures there. Our grandstand floor opportunities this past year, we did a new thing called Partnering on the Patio. This gave opportunities for people in our community, in our state, to come out and have an area on the patio right in front of the stage to bring in their special guests and or staff members. We also did what we deemed as our party pit. This was an opportunity in front of the stage where people could get up front and close with our entertainers. We had at some of the concerts, we had about 1,000 people right in front of the stage. New for 2021, Ike, our mascot, made his appearance, and prior to that, traveled throughout the state of Kansas, showcasing our new mascot. We had our free stage concerts on the People's Bank and Trust. They were a new sponsor for 2021. Our new competitions included butter sculptures, posters. Our pollinator garden was a very big thing for the kids as they were coming into the garden or grounds and looking at the gardens and working with the monarch butterfly pollination area. We also worked with Cargill and brought in the Special Olympics Championship Livestock Showmanship. This gave Special Olympics individuals the opportunity to actually show an animal, and that was just very heart-wrenching with them being able to do hands-on and working with their sponsor to show an animal. We did our first ever pub crawl, which brought in about 140 people on one night, and Nellie was our biggest grandstand entertainment at the grandstand. Senate Bill 2 will come before you this year again, and what this is creating a three-dimensional barrier on the fairgrounds to move the consumption of alcohol outside of the designated beer gardens. This is very similar to local communities that use this for street dances. We just want the opportunity to be able to use more than just the beer garden area for entertainment. It also gives the opportunity to put some special funding into our capital improvements fund. It did pass the Senate with 31 votes. Where does our funding come from? First off, we are a fee-funded based organization. The vast majority of it comes from the fair and non-fair events, our commercial exhibitors, corporate sponsors, food sales, our RV park, gate admission, concert tickets, and our midway. Non-fair revenue, if you look at our numbers in 2021, we had about 450 non-fair events. Projected revenue is about $750,000, and average attendance on that is about 51,000 people. Some of the things that bring in non-fair revenue is our RV rallies. As soon as the fair got finished this last year, we had 3 back-to-back RV rallies. The first one was our Good Sam's that brought in about 250 people, $5,700. We had our heavy-duty truck rally. That brought in about 150 trucks, approximately $8,200 for income there. Our family campers was one of our largest ones with 600 people, approximately $36,000 in revenue, so a little over $50,000 just on our RV rallies. Other things that we do on our grounds is weddings, quinceañeras, and different things. We had 34 receptions in 2021. Average cost of a reception is about $1,000. Average attendance is about 350 people. So we bring in about 34,000 people for that type of event. I'm just going to run through this list really fast. This is just a group of non-fair events that we've had and the number of people that are attending. and they range anywhere from celebration of life to our big cattle shows, to junior livestock, to proms, different things of that sort. Some fairgrounds updates for 2022. Our Capper project, the House of Capper has been an iconic piece to the State Fair. It was built in 1913, and that was named after Arthur Capper, who was a former U.S. Senator and Governor of Kansas. The creation of the Capper Co-op Park is another part that we're adding to this. That'll go just north of the House of Capper, and this will celebrate the Capper-Volstead Act. And our plan is to dedicate this during Fair of 2022. I'll just give you a quick, this is some of the plans for the facility. And as you can see here, this area, let me get this to work. Right up in here, you can't see it, the walking path, that's going to tell the story of the co-ops as you walk through that park area. One of the other areas that we're working on this year is our Expo Center. This is our largest horse arena. We replaced the roof, replaced all the side metal on the inside of this, refurbished the columns. They were rusting. New insulation, improved our ventilation, updated our electrical service, updated the lighting, and it was KDFA financing at $1.2 million. Our roadways throughout the grounds, we're in the process of milling and overlaying the grounds. They are in dire need. So every year we are putting a certain amount of money into our capital improvements to make sure that we're upkeeping all of those roads throughout the fairgrounds. Our grandstand, as you can see the changes from 1910 all the way through till now. There is some structural issues up in the grandstand seating area that we'll be fixing this summer to the tune of about $125,000. Future projects that we're looking at is our Bison Arena. The Bison Arena was built in 1937, and it was used during World War II for the Navy, and in 2019, the fire marshal closed us down because it didn't have proper ADA doors, sprinkler systems, and so we are looking at turning it into an agricultural innovation center, and we are right now working with an architect. The estimated cost is between $15 and $20 million. Again, these are all state buildings. We want to bring this back in because it is an iconic piece to the Kansas State Fair. This is just a quick run through of what the building would look like. I know we're pressed for time, so I think I will pass up on that one and give you kind of an overview of what the new building could potentially look like. This is on the inside here. There will be an Ag Innovation Center, like we had said, giving an opportunity for us to showcase agriculture and innovation throughout the state. Several meeting rooms, moving our area for all of our archives and everything over into this building as well, and our birthing center. Second floor will have another meeting room, some outdoor shots, some of the indoor renderings of what it could potentially look like. Your support ensures that we can move forward. In 2021, the International Association of Fairs and Expositions is our organization that we belong to, and we received a communications award, and that award was for
My hands were sticky. My hair was a mess.
one of our
My eyes
advertisements.
sparkled. The state fair was the best. I remember the food, the games and the rides, the animals and the contests, and the big yellow slide. Soon I'll grow up, but I'll always remember that special time every year in September. Thank you for showing me how much you care, and someday I'll take my own kids to the fair.
Bring the kids in your life to the Kansas State Fair, September 10th through 19th. Go to kansasstatefair.com to start planning.
And we'll see you at the fair, September 9th through the 18th. I'd be open for questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I always enjoy the fair. What percent of the midway receipts does the fair receive?
In the past, it's been 36%. Right now, we are in the process of renegotiating it, and it'll go up to 38%. This past year was the largest that they've ever had as far as gates.
A lot of return then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you do. Please thank your staff when you go back to Hutch. Everybody in my district, we love the fair. People take their family vacations to the fair every year. So great job for everything you guys do there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I would definitely make sure that they hear that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to put a plug in. You're new to your job, so I don't know if you've been aware, if you are thinking along these lines, but 2026 is the semi-quincentennial of the United States of America.
Okay.
And the federal government has asked us that every county do a celebration of the history in some way of the county, telling about your county. I have a bill that's been in the House for a year. Hopefully it'll come out this year to form a commission to raise money for that purpose. But I wanted to just put it on your calendar.
Absolutely.
That it's something I think the state fair might want to keep an eye on. I don't know if we may put someone from the fair or designee on the board.
Absolutely. We'd be more than happy to.
But I just hope that goes through this year, and it's going to be a historic time for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative
Gardner. Right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thanks for everything you do, and you're new at this job, and we appreciate everything in your staff. It's what was already mentioned. One of the things that I was trying to achieve a couple years ago was to do a legislative post-audit of the fair, and there were a couple of other questions. I tried to get that approved, that particular audit again this past year, and it was not approved. So I was just thinking, I'd like to know from research if they can do anything on this. I want to know what other states do, how they fund their fairs, how much the state general funds go into funding their fairs. I'd like a comparison maybe of Oklahoma, Nebraska, Iowa in particular, because they have one heck of a fair up there. I've been there a few times. And I used to so I would request research to maybe look into that. The last thing is really two things. Number one, I appreciate the horse barn and you updating that because it needed some work. When I used to show horses a few years ago, it was not in the best shape. But the last thing, here's a really key important question for the chairman. And I'm going to ask him, are you really Ike the Bison? I just wanted to ask that question, Mr. Chairman.
You finally caught me. Just keep that to yourself. So, now that the Mr. Bison's done, the questions I have for you, Brian, is I see what you're doing, and I think it's great, but it's kind of like the casino. Everything that seems to be really booming in Kansas is places that pay no property tax and kind of have outsourced funding. And what I'm concerned about, I don't know the Hutchinson market that well, but it's hard. And I know you're doing your job, but it's hard for someone within, say, 100 miles of your operation to compete with wedding venues, parties, events, when they're paying a pretty good load on property tax and other situations. So I hope you do good, but I hope that you kind of talk to some of either the local chamber or some of the local businesses to make sure you're working together and not fighting each other for the buck. So any questions? Yeah. Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, a couple of things. I'm curious, and it's probably in here, the revenue that you may have brought in from the sales tax rebate that we gave to the fair a couple of years ago, 3 years ago.
I know that on an estimate, it comes in right around that 300,000.
Which is what that's our target, right? And we wanted to help pay off. Were we paying off the bonds that the governor paid off early? Victoria, I would ask you.
Thank you for the question. So in statute, there is supposed to be a transfer from the state general fund to the state fair capital improvements fund. That transfer had not been made in some time, so to replace that transfer, this was implemented. So it wasn't allowing the fair to keep some of the sales tax was implemented, so it wasn't targeted to pay off certain bonds. It was to replace an SGF transfer.
Right, but wasn't the transfer to pay off bonds? I mean, that's what I was thinking. Maybe that's wrong.
I mean, bonds are counted as capital improvement, but the fair has capital improvements other than just bonds. So that entire fund that the transfer was going into wasn't just used for bonds, it was used for all capital
The
improvements.
legislation that we passed will allow that to continue so that you do have that source for your improvements on the Bison Barn and whatever.
As long as the fair stays in Hutchinson, yes. That was one of the stipulations.
And so, and Victoria, again, the early payoff of the bond, could you elaborate a little bit on that, please? I don't know what the bond was for, how much, or.
Sure, so the payoff amount for this summer was $2.3 million, so that was the amount that was paid off. It saved about $134,000 in interest by paying them off early. The bonds were going towards the State Fair Master Plan, which was started in 2002 and was a large capital improvements project that lasted until 2007 that covered improvements across the fairground, to be honest. So it was paying off that large project that ended in 2007.
Okay, thank you for that information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Gardner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, at one time you were contemplating having a foundation, a state board foundation. Where is that at today? Have you established that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There is a State Fair foundation that has 3 representatives from the State Fair on it. They're a totally separate entity, and we work very, very closely with them for fundraising. They actually are the fundraising arm that is raising the monies for the House of Capper remodeling project.
Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I apologize if you've already gone over this. Actually, I missed it. I was a few minutes late, and I apologize for that also. What is the contribution? You'd said something about as long as the State Fair stays in Hutch, and it just made me wonder, how much cash does the county of Reno actually spend to the fair? I mean, do they do any sort of, no. So everything that is on the state fairgrounds, the state pays for. Reno County doesn't help with any sort of improvements or basically just the roads then getting to the state fair?
Yeah, nothing, Representative, nothing at this time. As I stated, I've only been here for 6 months in this position, so one of my goals is to work with the city and the county about getting some additional funding for the state fair as well. But currently, the only monies that we receive are $135,000 from the legislature, and that goes for utilities that are basically for the state fair itself. Everything else is monies that we make within the state fair to run the property.
So is there a contract then with Hutchison that the state fair will be in Hutch for the next 100 years or anything like that? So all of the revenue they get from like hotels and restaurants and everything when everybody comes to town, I mean, good for Hutch, right? But they don't really have any sort of cash outlay in terms of helping to subsidize the fair at all.
Correct.
Awesome.
Correct.
Thank you so much.
The way that works, Representative, if they know they're not moving, they're probably not worried about it. So, but it's good for the area. I mean, it's got to be a big boom for the multi-county area.
Well, right, and it's been there forever.
So,
It's been in Hutch forever. I mean, I'm not advocating to move the fair at all.
yeah.
But,
Yeah. So, thank you, Representative.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You all have one for later.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Dylan Deere. I'm with the Legislative Research Department as a managing analyst. We also have Bob North, Chief Legal Counsel for the Department of Commerce, and Sherry Renfro here as well. So they'll be able to answer any questions maybe that I'm not able to address in this document before you. I was going to speak directly from the budget analysis. I'll probably talk a little bit about the budget overviews, a little bit about some of the performance measures that Sherry has already spoken to you about, and then they do have a small degree of capital improvements in here. I also passed out the EDIF table as well, so you should have a copy of that. It's a long piece of paper. And this is just the expenditures from the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. There's been a pretty major change in the allocation of expenditures and the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2023. Formerly, a lot of that money went into the state general fund. So when they removed that transfer into the state general fund, it freed up a lot of other allocations of funding that you're going to see inside of this budget. That said, with a little bit of overview, I would like to turn to page 5. So you can see the table here that's just showing the major categories of expenditure inside of the agency. And you can see, if you look in the table, that yellow line bending upward, that's the governor's recommendation, and the green line flat, this is just state general fund. There didn't used to be a whole lot of state general fund inside of this budget. The only SGF budget, monies that used to be in here were those that were dedicated to the Kansas Bioscience Authority, just to pay off their remaining obligations. Those were mostly lapsed last year, in fact. And there was language inserted into the budget bill that would just allow them to draw down funds if any new obligations came up. So the majority of those. Inside of the governor's recommendation, and I'll touch on that when I talk about the 23 budget, there is some additional funding from the state general fund. Moving to page 6. You can see in the table at the top, the original legislative approved amount was about $100 million, with about $10,000 from the state general fund. And there's an SGF reappropriation of $6.6 million. That brings you to a total all funds budget of $106.8 million approved. And the agency request takes you to $110 million. All right. And the governor's recommendation takes you to $136.2 million inside of there. And I'll touch on those as I move along. So the agency estimate is an increase of $3.9 million, or 3.7% above the 22 approved. There's community development block grant aid to local units. There's an additional $2 million of those federal funds to enhance that CDBG grant. There's an additional $2.4 million in EDIF reappropriations. So those are monies that from last year that did not get spent from the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. Turning to page 7, if you look at Job Creation Program Fund, there's a deletion of $1.4 million from the JCPF. The agency has just indicated that they wanted to prioritize SGF spending in the current year because they were appropriated some additional SGF, that big reappropriation carryover. That was as a result of the fact that they spent some Job Creation Program Fund dollars last year to do some like COVID assistance, and so then the State Finance Council sort of swapped it out. And so it just left them with some money to make up for that reduction. If you look at the impact program, there's an additional $464,437 for workforce AID. The TEFI funds, Technology-Enabled Fiduciary Financial Institutions, there was a deletion of $250,000. And that's just because they're still setting up the program. So they had originally budgeted, but didn't know exactly how to budget it this year. We'll see that adjusted as that program gets stood up. For federal trade adjustment assistance, there's an additional $4 million in federal trade adjustment assistance. And this is just some enhanced funding for the program during the pandemic. Round 3 CRF awards, there's an additional $800,000 in CRF awards. Those monies were allocated for restaurants, theaters, large venue support, PPE manufacturing, private colleges. And that $800,000 represents unspent and recouped funding, but still dedicated to the same purpose. If you look at the federal apprenticeship program, you added $253,000 in federal funds for the federal apprenticeship program, and you look at $235,000 in the state apprenticeship program. And we'll see this continue to expand in '23 as well, with substantial expansions in the apprenticeship programs. You have a deletion of $644,000 for the AJLA, or America's Job Link Alliance subscription fees, and they're just adjusting that to match their projections. For the Creative Arts Industries Commission, you have a deletion of $232,000 for a reduced estimate on CAIC grants. And for the Athletics Commission, you have a deletion of $101,129 from the Athletics Fee Fund. I saw some heads pop up on the CAIC stuff. There was some enhanced funding for CAIC coming in through COVID, and so that's what's really driving that stuff. For the Kansas Health Professional Opportunity Projects, there's a deletion of $2.9 million. This is a short duration program that ended during FY 2022. It's a federal program. There's a workforce investment, or WIA dislocation, deleted $579,000. As training opportunities are projected to decrease. And there's about $36,000 in other various adjustments. They're left over after I hit all the high points. If we turn to the next page, I'll go ahead and get the GovRec out of the way. So the governor's recommendation is 136.2, including 26.6 SGF. It's an increase of 25.5. All right, and the first, you have an additional $20 million in SGF that's going to the moderate income housing program within the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation. That program will help build both single-family and multifamily, does grants for single-family and multifamily homes in rural counties in Kansas. And there's a Pathway Home 2 grant, and this was just a federal grant that became available subsequent to the submission of the budget. It's a new one. And it's a pilot program to provide eligible incarcerated individuals in state correctional facilities or local county jails workforce services prior to release, and sort of like continuing those services after release while doing that transition. So it's sort of just connecting up these inmates as they're getting closer to release with workforce services. And the governor also recommends adding $5 million to the Job Creation Program Fund for Economic Development in '22. With that, I would stand for questions on FY 2022.
Submitting any questions from Mr. Barrett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things. Thank you for not talking so fast. I realized my problem with your speed is that I'm a lip reader. I don't hear as well as I'd like to, and I do depend on that, and boy, they go fast.
It's really, I am the same way, and when people are wearing their masks, it's very difficult to understand them.
Even worse. The creative arts industry, well, these reductions, all of the reductions. I guess I'm trying to understand, I should have already known this, but these are COVID-related funds that we got, that we don't get?
Some of them are COVID-related funds. There was some additional funding put into the Creative Arts Industries Commission as part of the CARES Act.
Yes, that one was.
Right.
And so I'm seeing that as I go through here. So when we're doing our budgets and appropriations, if we get ARPA funds in there, it's going to reflect in the total budget?
So
For
ARPA
that
funds are
agency?
not currently reflected in any of these budgets for the most part. Office of the Governor may have a little bit in there. But those monies are still being allocated. And so
After they're allocated, when we see them next year, will they show up as a deletion if we've put ARPA funds in? So that's the way the process works.
that's exactly correct.
Okay, thank you.
So if they were put into the current year, when you look at it next year, it'll appear to be a decrease.
One other question on the income for the moderate income housing. I'd like a little more information about that. And are those competitive grants? Are they CDBG grants? What?
No, so that is run out of the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, which is a quasi-governmental entity. It's the entity in Kansas that manages all the various federal programs that does sort of housing. And this is the really only state program that does this. Up till now, it's been about $2 million annually put into that program. And so this is just a huge increase. Obviously, there was a big housing study that just came out, and this is sort of in response to that, is my understanding. I do believe Ryan, who is the executive director, will be speaking in front of House Appropriations tomorrow. So he'll be able to provide you some additional detail on that program.
Well, just be sure I understand what you said. This money is going to the HRC?
Right, so it appears as an expenditure here. It'll probably show up as like other assistance, so it becomes a, like sort of a transfer. This is the way it's been explained to me, is it'll get transferred. So far, I haven't seen anything in the bill that causes this to happen when I look at the language. But this is how I've been told that the program is intended to be spent.
So I guess if we approve it, then it certainly is needed. The Housing Resources Corporation, I think, is who I've been working with on trying to get some money for weatherization for a family and those kinds of resources. So this 20 million wouldn't necessarily be new structures, but maybe, is it?
It's more new structures. This is more the development of new housing. Now, there might be a little bit of rehab from an existing structure, making it habitable again. I mean, the max amount of the grants is $400,000. I don't know that they are going to change that. Some 99% of counties actually in Kansas fall below the threshold to be considered rural. But no, it's for two primary purposes. It's either multifamily dwellings, or single-family homes, both of which can apply for grants.
And it's for rural.
And it is for rural.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and you're wearing my favorite tie today, because you know me and my turquoise, love it. Couple questions for you, and I'm sorry if I missed this. Page 5, there's a significant uptick. We have 14 million, 13 million, 13 million, 14 million, 209 million. Am I reading that? Oh, shoot, fire. Well, that'd be the reason that I missed it, because you haven't said it yet. Okay, and then, well, that's also 2023. You know what? We'll catch you on the next round, because, yeah, awesome. Thank you.
All right. Seeing none, if you could turn to page 10.
That's all right.
So the agency's revised estimate is 110.7 with 6.6 from the SGF. That was for 22. And then the revised estimate for 23 will be 105.8. So that is going to be a decrease of 4.9 million or 4.5% below the 22 revised estimate. So KBA grant commitments, first, they deleted, and keep in mind, these are only deletions because they were in the budget in 22. Okay, so we have to show them basically reversing them out. So for KBA grant commitments, you have the deletion of the $6.6 million from funds appropriated to settle the liabilities of the KBA, but mostly those funds were actually just put into that SGF account, and it's really to make up for those JCPF dollars that we talked about earlier. Now, everything that's marked with an enhancement in the bold under these two is going to be like a new program or major expansion of a program in FY23. So there's an enhancement in Kit Kerr where they added $2 million to EDIF, that's Kansas Industrial Training and Retraining. These sentences are very brief, but if you want some additional detail, I have some additional detail starting on page 13. But I'll just go through the highlights real quick and then we can touch on the ones in greater detail. So there's $93,000 of EDIF and 1 FTE for an agency grant writer. There's $500,000 EDIF for the Registered Apprenticeship Program. There's $1 million for broadband development. There's $1 million and 5 FTEs for the Kansas Tourism Division. There's $69,000 in the Office of Innovation and 1 FTE. There's $99,000 in Salesforce Data Integrity and Analysis. That's 1.0 FTE. There's $1 million for new small business research and development grants. There's $81,000 and 1 FTE for a lead research analyst. There's $105,000 and 1 FTE for a cybersecurity program manager. There's $200,000 to upgrade the CRM software. There's $56,000 and 1 FTE for an administrative assistant in the Office of Innovation. There's $714,000 of EDIF to support work-based learning intermediaries. There's $402,000 for a new federal, and this at this point, it's no longer enhancements. So these are just more regular changes that we normally see. There's a deletion of $402,000 all from federal funds in the retain program. Phase 1 of the grant ends in December of 2021. There may be a new phase. It just hasn't been awarded yet. We deleted the $800,000 in round 3 CRF awards. I'm on item 16. And deleted $4.8 million in impact program bond expenses. Turn to the next page. Added $4.3 million all from the JCPF. That's an additional SGF appropriation from 21 will be expanded and funding shifted back to the JCPF. Deleted the $2.5 million in EDI reappropriations. Deleted $550,000 for impact program services fees. Deleted $300,000 in AJLA fees. Deleted $172,000 in the Federal Kansas Health Opportunities Project. And there's $107,000 in other various adjustments. And I know that's a lot of items, but I'm going to go ahead and touch on the governor's recommendation so we can look at that as a whole. So the governor's recommendation total is 339.6, including 205.1 SGF. That's an increase of 233.8 million. So first, there's the Pathway Home 2 grant that adds $700,000. We talked about that on the last budget. For higher education grants, there's $10 million in higher education grants that are focused on economic development. There's $27.9 million in job creation program funds. So that's been the transfers to the job creation program fund have been capped effectively, I think at like $3.5 million. And so this doesn't completely remove that cap, but it does raise the annual cap on those transfers. There's $195 million, all SGF, for university grant projects for fiscal year 2023. $20 million of that, $195 million, would be earmarked for NIAR at Wichita State University. That's the National Institute for Aviation Research. And $125,000 all SGF and 1 FTE position for a project director for Advantage Kansas. And I'm going to touch on just a couple. If you turn to page 15, I know that there's some additional, quite a bit of additional detail on there on how the $1 million plans to be spent at the Office of Broadband Development in item 4. So you sort of see the additional positions that they're looking to retain. And if you turn to page 14, I know that this committee asked a lot of questions to the tourism group from Commerce, tourism people from Commerce. This will sort of outline how they are planning to spend that enhancement. So they're adding $550,000 in direct marketing to visitors using the To the Stars campaign. There's $200,000 for a billboard campaign. There's $100,000 in agritourism marketing. And there's $100,000 in marketing to increase visitation along the 12 byways in Kansas. And there's a $50,000 investment in the Kansas magazine. And like I said, there's a lot of additional detail as you work through each one of these various enhancements. And I could read this to you, but honestly, the agency might be better to respond to some of those like fine details on that. I will touch very briefly on some of the performance measures. So if you turn to page 18, this is administration program performance measures. So number 3, broadband, the Office of Broadband Development is inside the administration program. So you can see that the number of premises connected, $45,000 in 21, or 45,000 households, a little over 45,000 in 21. And there was a lot of additional federal funding that came through to make that possible. $7,500 homes and 10,000 homes are targets for 21, or 22 and 23.
Homes, not dollars.
Correct, yes, and I keep messing up. So turning to page 19. If you look at business development, if you look at the number of jobs created or retained through business development efforts, it's going from 14,520 to about $17,000 in 21, or 17,000 in 21 actuals, up to a target of 21,500 roughly is the target. If you look at private capital investment, it's going from about 1.5 billion to 2.7 billion. And if you look at the number of jobs created or retained through retention or expansion efforts, it's going from about 11,000 to 14,000. A lot of these targets that you're seeing here are reflective of some of those enhancement requests that you saw earlier in the budget. And if you turn to workforce services, we don't need to talk about those. Let's talk about, on page 23, community development. So you can see in here those number of housing units rehabilitated going from 70 to about 120. If you look at the number of grant applications received by community development programs, 350, 370. And I think, skip over international business. and go directly to tourism on page 27. So the amount of statewide transient guest tax collections has been about a little over $40 million. It dropped to a target in 22 at 35 and back to 40 million for 23. If you look at visitor spending in the state in billions, actuals in 20 were 7.3, actuals in 21, 5.4. They're looking to get back to around $7 billion. If you look at the number of visitors to Kansas, it looks to be stable or slightly dropping. You're seeing that. And I will turn to the very back page on capital improvements. The agency requests $230,000 off of special revenue funds for some re-roofing and replacement at the Garden City Job Center, and $100,000 for plumbing repairs at the Topeka Workforce Center. It's an increase of $105,000. And in 23, you're looking at $100,000 for some HVAC controls at the Topeka Workforce Center. With that, I would stand for questions on 23. And just to remind you that that goes back to page 10 is where that originated.
Thank you. So my previous question then about, well, shoot, let me look. Page 5, where we jump up to 209 million, is that happening because on page 12, number 27, is that the primary? I mean, that's a significant jump.
Yes. So if you look at the table on page 10, you can sort of see that you have $195 million of SGF in those university grant funding projects and $10 million of SGF, okay, in the higher education grants. And so that's definitely a large driver. You also have the $27.9 million in job creation program fund dollars as well. And JCPF is obviously not, that's not the state general fund, okay, but those monies would be in the state general fund if they were not in the job creation program fund. So it's sort of a revenue diversion. So.
Okay, so you're saying that that significant difference from 14 million to 209 million is a balance out from somewhere else? No, or is that new funding that's being asked for? And it's coming from, a lot of it is coming from this 195 million from the university grant funding projects.
That is correct.
Correct. Okay. So that's a lot. So we're going to ask for a tax cut with our sales tax food, which is great, but then we're going to increase from 14 to 200 million. Okay, just making sure I'm understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a lot of information to analyze there. And of course, one of the things you always have to remember, these are dollars that are invested, and they obviously are doing some great things as we see our economy right now. My question is on the bed tax and things there that we report on the hotels.
Okay. Transient guest tax?
Transient guest tax. So in our area, we've had an explosion of VRBOs and Airbnbs. Do those people report that?
I would have to look into that for you. I'm not entirely certain whether or not an Airbnb is reflected as a transient guest tax or not, or whether they're exposed to it. But I can get that information for you this afternoon.
Thank you. That, and I know there's some question in some of our tax committee representatives that are questioning whether or not those really ought to be residential properties or if they ought to be commercial properties. They're kind of undermining our hotel business is pretty tough. So, yeah, just a question. Thank you.
I'll find out for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping you can find out how many of these FTE positions are not filled and how long it's been since they've been filled.
So you're going to have a lot of vacant FTE positions
on
in
page 10.
Right. So you're going to have a lot of vacant FTE positions in 22. Okay. Because these will all be vacant currently, because obviously they're just still requesting the money. But if you want to know the number of vacant FTEs and then in FY 2022, the current year, I can find that out for you.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dylan, oh, now where'd I put it? It walked away. I wanted to know how we count jobs, for one thing, if they're a net or a gross count, and when we report jobs. Where did we report jobs? Page 19? Yeah, jobs created. number 3 on 19. How do we count jobs? If we've lost jobs in an industry, is that reflected or not?
It's really not. So all this is the specific number of jobs that are created or retained through this specific effort.
Business, new creations, new jobs opened.
But if there's
Okay.
a loss, that would not be offset in this number.
Okay, not a net. And the other thing, I just want to comment to Representative Baker's question. My daughter has been doing some Airbnbs, and I have a VRBO in another state. And all those things are reported to the states. And, I mean, depends on how you advertise and how you set it up, but if you're going through those legitimate websites, they. That's not a good thing. Well, my daughter says they take care of all that for her. They take the money out and they pay it and whatever, I don't know. So. She's taxed as residential. But she's paying the transient guest tax, that's the answer I was giving you. Maybe that's not the question you asked. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Actually, just a clarification. When you talk about delete this and delete that, does that mean, and I know you had mentioned that and I apologize, does that mean that it's been paid for or that's been reallocated somewhere else? I mean, we're deleting 400,000 here, we're deleting 800,000 here, deleting 4.8 million in bonds. Does that mean that those have been paid for?
So the last payments for those bonds will be in '23. And so you're seeing some reallocations between debt service interest and debt service principal in those, which is why those are going down. Those federal funds, that just means that the federal fiscal year is different from the state fiscal year. So in out years, you'll often see those drop off and become deletes. But then sometimes.
Does that mean they lose that money? They're losing that money?
It means that they can't budget that money until they know how much money they're going to be getting.
So they'll be getting some money, they just don't know that number from.
But they have a good idea that they're not going to have, for at least now, under the current grant period, they cannot budget it because they haven't received it. And so that'll tend to go down. But you'll often see increases in federal funds in the current year because they're adjusting their budget to reflect new grants that are going out.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that agency is going to be losing 4.8 million. They're going to be getting it. They just don't know exactly what that number is going to be.
Right, and I wouldn't consider that a loss. I mean, that's just debt service being paid off in that particular case. So they're just decreasing expenditures because some of those.
In other words, I shouldn't feel bad for them, is what you're saying?
Paying off bonds, oh no.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Next on the agenda is Sherry.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Corbett and members of the committee for allowing me to testify on behalf of the budget proposal for the Department of Commerce. I'm Sherry Renfro, Chief Fiscal Officer at Commerce. And our budget reflects how our agency is using our available fiscal resources wisely while executing a sustainable and successful business development strategy, as well as still investing in programs and strategies that are needed to encourage further economic growth in Kansas communities and in the state as a whole. As I mentioned last week, 2021 was a record-setting year for the department with nearly $3.8 billion in capital investment announced by private sector businesses, which led to 13,483 new and retained jobs through 321 economic development projects throughout the state. We are also proud of our many community-based achievements last year. The participation grew in our Main Street program, and the first round of our broadband acceleration grants has spurred needed projects to increase connectivity in underserved areas. We also had efforts to focus on housing options in Kansas, and the reorganization of Kansas tourism under Commerce was another important step this year. And finally, our Workforce Services Division continues to implement multifaceted efforts to strengthen the workforce and connect Kansans with good jobs statewide. Based on our successes and increased demand for our programs and our goals for individuals, business, and communities to achieve prosperity in Kansas, we are seeking the 13 budget enhancements and funding for 3 new initiatives, as well as increasing the cap on the job creation funds transfer to help strengthen our efforts. I'll briefly go over the 13 enhancement requests. In fiscal year 23, we are seeking $2 million for the Kansas Industrial Training and our Kansas Industrial Retraining programs. KIT-KER programs are designed to help companies create new jobs and retain jobs by offsetting training costs. At the current levels of funding, companies receive far less financial assistance and workforce training cost share assistance than a decade ago. Currently, Commerce is only able to provide an average of $340 per job in training assistance. This additional funding would make the state more competitive. Currently, peer states are funding workforce incentives with an average awards ranging in the $1,200 to $3,000 per job range. Furthermore, to continue support and grow the Kansas workforce, the department is requesting $500,000 for our registered apprenticeship program and $714,000 for our work-based learning program. Registered apprenticeships can play an important role in helping Kansas employers and communities bridge the gap between employment and education. Additionally, employers have the luxury of growing their own talent and training in the skills that are most important to them. The budget enhancement for work-based learning intermediaries would provide regional work-based learning programs in each school district in all 5 local workforce development regions. 2019-2020 Governor's Council on Education recommended that work-based learning in Kansas should be implemented to ensure Kansas students have equitable access to high-quality work-based learning experience designed to prepare each student for post-secondary and workforce success. Work-based learning programs act as a liaison between employers and school districts to facilitate internships, apprenticeship, and career shadowing opportunities. Kansas is currently conducting a cross-agency work-based learning regional program that will serve as a model to scale high-quality work-based learning across Kansas and develop a statewide system. Our next enhancement request is to support the Office of Broadband Development. Throughout the course of the pandemic, we saw the value and need for high-quality, affordable connectivity. $1 million enhancement will allow the office to continue to ramp up capacity to execute on the newly established state broadband strategy and deploy a large volume of projects and programs to design and expand robust broadband to all corners of the state, which would close the digital and economic divide. Based on the significant federal funding that is available, the office will need additional staff to support the programs we expect to create in the near term. The Office of Broadband Development was not the only department to make monumental strides last year. Kansas tourism experienced a rebirth as they became an economic development driver. We are seeking $1 million enhancement for the Kansas Tourism Division to allow tourism to multiply its currently successful To the Stars campaign by strategically expanding reach and saturation. This will result in increased support to the Kansas tourism industry, increased visitation to and throughout the state, and increased sale and guest tax collection for state and local communities. In 2021, the department also launched the Office of Innovation as a result of the Kansas Framework for Growth study, which identified innovation as one of the 4 pillars critical to the future of Kansas economy. The Office of Innovation is taking a lead role in rebuilding the network of local support partners to increase the capacity and expertise that Kansas can provide innovative and high-growth entrepreneurs and small businesses. We have 5 enhancement-related requests related to the Office of Innovation. First, request $1 million to support small business research and development acceleration growth program within the Office of Innovation. This grant program will support Kansas small businesses partnering with Kansas public higher education institutions, thus creating engagement and a mutual benefit. Small businesses working with Kansas public higher education institutions conducting research and development can receive a 50-50 matching grant up to $25,000 for R&D costs at a public institution. This budget enhancement will fund 40 grants, $25,000 each. We are also seeking funding for 4 positions within that office: a cybersecurity program manager, an agency grant writer, a program manager, and an administrative assistant. At the department, as the department becomes data-driven, it's become clear that upgrades to the agency's CRM software is desperately needed. Commerce is requesting $200,000 to increase to do a complete overhaul of our Salesforce system. This overhaul will allow us to address the lack of capacity around collecting data analytics and the management of data at the agency. In addition to the overhaul of Salesforce, we are also seeking a Salesforce data integrity analyst position in the data and research unit. The primary responsibility will be to manage, clean, and verify the data quality within the Salesforce database and to improve the overall accuracy of agency data using advanced computer science methods. We currently do not have an employee dedicated to the managing of our CRM software. And then we are also requesting an enhancement for our lead research analyst position, which will focus on data research needs within the agency. This position will allow us to utilize data to become more strategic in business and industries as we pursue as a state, which directly aligns with the initiatives aligned in the framework for growth. In addition to these budget enhancements, the governor is recommending funding for 3 initiatives, which include the University Economic Development Challenge Grant, the Moderate Income Housing, and Economic Development Grants for higher education. In fiscal year 22, the governor's budget includes $20 million to support the Moderate Income Housing Program, which is a highly successful program that allows funding for available housing options that addresses the housing needs in Kansas. To increase moderate housing income funding is one of the needs identified in the Housing Assessment Report, and it'll be truly a down payment on our future. This investment will supplement the current allocation of $2 million, which is roughly 69 cents per Kansas resident for housing, and that is simply not enough. For fiscal year 23, the University Economic Challenge Grant includes $195 million in grant funding to the region's institutions for projects that demonstrate a significant economic benefit to the community to address timely or economic needs for the state. This will enable universities to work with donors to develop proposals for state funding initiatives that will have significant long-term economic benefit to the state, and these funds will be matched dollar for dollar by universities with non-state money. Each of these grants will be an excellent private and public partnership, which will maximize the investment made by taxpayers. And this fund will be housed within Commerce as it aligns with the initiatives in our framework for growth. Included in this $195 million is an allocation of $20 million to the National Institute for Aviation Research at Wichita State University, and this will be seed funding to help them start construction on a hangar. Lastly, the governor's budget in fiscal year 23 includes $10 million to support economic development grants for higher education. These grants will focus on aligning university economic development initiatives within the framework for growth in order to spur commercialization, innovation, and workforce development. And this will also require an additional $125,000 for a program director. And lastly, to touch on the job creation cap increase, the Job Creation Fund is a deal closing fund for the state. It was created in 2011 by combining the impact and key-off programs. And the intent behind JCF was to give the Secretary of Commerce latitude to meet the needs in recruiting and retaining companies to grow within the Kansas economy. JCF dollars are very efficient as legislative post-audit determined the state receives a return on investment of $39.60 for every dollar spent. Funding JCF at the requested level would allow the state to better meet existing urgent needs and position us to take advantage of future opportunities. We recommend increasing the cap of the JCF transfer to $8.5 million for fiscal year 22 and $35 million for 23. The cap has previously been set at $3.5 million for several years. Thank you. I'd like to thank the committee for providing me the opportunity to testify, and please let me know if there are any questions. Thank you.
Very well done. Committee, any questions?
Thank you. Great job. And I just want to mention this morning in our Rural Development Committee, we talked about adding maybe some more money to that rural housing initiative. So I hope we can get that across the line. We're making some great strides on that, and we have some really good examples in my district where that money has really helped a lot. So these are some really good investments we're making. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sherry, thank you. Great job. Question concerning broadband. You're requesting $1 million, and I guess my question is, do we know from the infrastructure bill that was passed has bipartisan effort, it has quite a bit of money for broadband. And I was just wondering, do we know how much Kansas is going to receive? And the follow-up question would be, can we utilize that for paying expenses in our broadband office at the Department of Commerce?
I know there are federal funds that have been allocated, and they expect to receive, there's $217 million in federal funds that are pending that will go towards broadband in Kansas. And I mean, the office will definitely utilize that for infrastructure. The $1 million that we are requesting is to get our office up and going, as the office has just recently developed this past year. So we do need staff to help operate that and get all those grants out and get the infrastructure going. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Dave, you talked about Representative Baker, sorry. You talked about this morning, I'm not sure he's focused. You talked this morning about the committee. What is the term, or what is by definition rural in terms of this housing? What do you use for that definition?
So in response to that, so that's a real interesting deal. There's 50 different definitions of rural housing. You and I have a definition of rural, and my brother in Phoenix has another definition. So HUD, Housing Urban Development, says it's 50,000. So somewhere in there we'll probably develop a number. I know a lot of the initiatives we've looked at are communities of 9,500 and less. I think there's a bill floating around with that. So yeah, identifying what's rural, that'll be something that we'll try to get pinpointed down so we get the money to where it's intended, that we think it's intended. I hope some of my other representatives understand that they've had their bite of the apple.
Thank you.
I see what you're doing here, and then I go over to page 27, and it seems like the numbers never change. And if you keep doing it, the thing that frustrates me with tourism, if you keep doing the same thing every year, you're going to get the same results. And I think the new generation, I mean, billboards are great and all that. I'm not going to tell you to spend your money, but I wish you'd maybe take a second look at that and try to catch what's turning on these 35 and younger, or the people who are, or whatever, because I think we're missing a lot of people, a lot of whatever coming here. The other thing why I've got you here is it's kind of a byproduct of wildlife and parks and tourism. So I think the lady's name is Kimberly. She took over the agritourism. Who's in charge of your agritourism?
At Commerce?
Yep. Well, whoever it is. So we allocated them $100,000 last year, and they were to report like now if they spent the money and what good they did for the farmers and ranchers of Kansas. So time is kind of short. You might see if she's got something and she could just, if she said since she got hired late, she could just say whatever. You know what I'm saying? We'd like to hear where the money went.
Okay. So, yes, we will definitely get you a report for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I so appreciate the chairman's comments, because it reminded me of something that's really taken off on Facebook. You probably already know about this, but what happened when COVID hit was that all these folk, meat shelves were empty, for instance. And so Shop Kansas Farms, are you familiar with that Facebook group?
I am not, no, not personally.
Yeah, so that would actually probably be something good for your agritourism gal, but it's phenomenal. There's over 100,000 people that have liked this page, I think even like just within months. I mean, it's incredible. And they have this interactive map about all these farmers and ranchers, people who are selling their wares, their beef, their milk, their eggs, whatever, all across the state of Kansas, jams. I mean, it's really phenomenal. And I guess I've just been a little bit disappointed that the department, we're an ag state, and yet the Department of Commerce, when I went to go look for Kansas-based products, actually just this last weekend, because I was going to send a care package, there's just not a lot on the web to be able to really promote Kansas-based agriculture products. And so I would just encourage you, the fellow that started that, his name is Rick McNary. You've never met him personally, talked to him a lot on Facebook, but that has saved a lot of small family farms who are now selling direct to the consumer. So I would think it would be something the Department of Commerce would absolutely want to tap into and help somehow, since that's kind of the backbone of our state. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, if I might, Chairman, is because this whole $200 million increase, it's just bugging the heck out of me. So can you, and you might have explained it, and I'm so sorry if you did, I'm going to need you to re-explain it. Page 12, where we talked about this lion's share here, this $195 million of these university grant funding projects. I mean, is that obviously is the difference between, we're rocking along 14, 15, 13 million and then 209. So can you explain how that's working? I mean, are those federally subsidized grant projects, or is that actually money that's going to be coming out of the state of Kansas? Because it looks like it's the state, but I'm not an expert on all these yet.
So that'll be state funding that comes from state general fund, and it'll be, I'm sorry, I was looking at my notes. These will be grants that will be matched by public and private companies. So, I mean, it'll be a matching grant program as well. So we'll give them money and then they will match.
But it's going to be 195 million will come out of the state general fund, and then the matching grant or the matching funds will be a separate revenue stream.
Correct, from what I understand. And 20 million of that will be used as a one-time funding for the hangar for the aviation. 20 million of the 195 will be used towards funding the aviation at Wichita State, the hangar.
If you don't mind me responding, Chairman, so do you know where that's coming from, that we went from 14 million to 200 and some? I mean, where is this 100? I mean, that's just significant. So do you know the governor's why?
I have more information I can pass along to you, an info sheet. If I can get that to you, I can ask for more information on that.
Perfect. Thanks.
We currently do. Yes, we have 27 positions that we are currently posting and recruiting for, and an additional 4 that are in process to be ready to be posted. And that does not include from the enhancement requests. These are just open positions that we have now. Correct. The enhancement, the positions that we have on the enhancement is not included in that 27, since it's not been approved yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it looks, by kind of doing some oversight on that budget, we're moving more. Commerce has changed a lot in the last 2 years, and a lot of us going technology-wise. That's the need for those new technology positions, and we know from our past experience what happens when we don't fund those. And I used to sit on a technology committee here in the and the capital, and we did away with that committee, and that turned out to be a bad deal too. So sometimes we need to remember we can't save our way to prosperity. We have to invest our way to prosperity. And I think some of these expenses, and I know that's a lot of money, but those are investments we need to make if we want to compete in the next 5-10 years. Thank you.
Committee, last chance, any questions? Thank you for coming. You did a great job.
Thank you.
If you'll look in your deal, you've got some written proponents. Blake Flanders, Kansas Public Broadcasting, and the Kansas Workforce One. So with that, if that's the good of the order,